My son was 8 years old when he caught me crying in the car. It was the first time I didn't wipe my tears away in front of someone. That day, I stopped being the perfect superhero and became a real dad. The ironic part is that the reason for my tears wasn't just the layoff I'd just gotten. It was a lifetime of swallowed crying, all deciding to crash down at once. And if you think this story is about a weak man who couldn't handle the pressure, I need to tell you everything from the beginning. Because maybe, in the end, you'll realize this story is also a little bit about you. Childhood, how he learned to swallow his tears. I grew up hearing the same sentence at home. Boys don't cry. My dad repeated it like it was a Bible verse, like it was a universal law, like gravity, something you don't question. You just obey. I remember a scene that seems small, but it never left my mind. I was about 6. It was a sunny Saturday, one of those you remember even the smell of. I was playing soccer in the street with the neighborhood kids. Back then, we weren't afraid of cars or anything. The street was ours. I went to dribble past Ryan, an older kid who always played with us, and he slid in from behind. I fell badly. My knee scraped on the asphalt. My arm got skinned. The palm of my hand was raw. I looked at the scrape and saw the blood sliding slowly, mixing with the dust of the street. It hurt. It hurt a lot. My eyes filled with tears instantly. I ran inside, holding my arm, calling, "Dad!" He was sitting on the couch, watching a game. The TV was blaring, the announcer shouting a touchdown for some team I don't even remember. My dad looked at my bloody knee, made a face and said, "That's nothing. If you cry over that, life's gonna eat you alive." He didn't even get up from the couch. He just reached over, grabbed a bottle of rubbing alcohol from a nearby cabinet, and dumped it straight onto the scrape. The pain burned up my leg. It felt like liquid fire going into my skin. I opened my mouth to cry, but he cut me off. "Swallow it, Michael, you're a man." And I swallowed it. Not because it hurt less, but because it hurt more to disappoint my dad. That day, I learned a lesson I carried for decades. Pain exists, but you're not allowed to show it to anyone. School wasn't much different. I was a quiet kid, a little out of place. Big ears, too skinny, talked very little. The perfect combo to become a target. Other boys made fun of my ears, my quiet way of being, said I looked like I had satellite dishes on my head. They laughed loud at recess, pointing at me. I pretended not to hear, but I heard everything. When I got home, my mom could tell something had happened. "What's wrong, honey?" I'd answer, voice a bit shaky. "They keep making fun of me, Mom, every day." And she'd say, "They're just joking, sweetheart. You need to be stronger. Ignore them." No one asked how I felt. They only asked what I was going to do to prove it didn't bother me. The message was clear. If you show that something affects you, you're weak. And the weak don't survive. One time I got home really crying. A group of boys had cornered me in the bathroom, thrown my backpack into the toilet, and laughed while I tried to fish my soaked notebooks out. My mom saw my red eyes and asked, "Have you been crying, Michael?" I nodded. She sighed, a little impatient. "You've got to learn to stand up for yourself, son. If you just cry, they'll do this to you forever." The advice wasn't about how to deal with what I felt. It was about how to hide it better. Other references, family. On weekends, we'd go to backyard barbecues at my grandpa's house. The whole family together. Uncles, cousins, random neighbors. The grill was in the backyard, and the men would gather there, beer in hand, talking about sports, politics, and other men. I'd hang nearby, half listening, half pretending not to. One time my Uncle Jerry mentioned a coworker. "John quit his job and now he's depressed. What a wimp. Back in our day you just sucked it up. There was no 'I'm so sad' nonsense." My dad nodded along. Another uncle added, "Nowadays at the slightest thing they want therapy, pills. What they need is a little backbone." I'd listen and store it all away. Each sentence was another brick in the wall I was building around myself. Growing up in that environment is like going through invisible training. You learn that any strong emotion is a sign of weakness. That asking for help is admitting defeat. That feeling too much is for people who can't handle life. So you stop feeling, or at least, you stop showing. As a teenager, I became the guy who cracks jokes about everything. The clown of the group. If someone hurt me, I made a joke before I let myself feel it. If I was sad, I'd come up with a joke. If I was scared, I'd laugh louder. It was the perfect armor. No one suspects the one who's always laughing. Once, when I was 13, I finally got up the nerve to talk to a girl. Her name was Emily. Brown hair, pretty smile, sat in the front row. I'd liked her for months. I'd write her name secretly in my notebook, look for excuses to walk past her desk. One day, I took a deep breath and went to talk to her at recess. I walked over, stammering, heart racing. Before I could open my mouth, one of her friends cut in. "Whoa, Michael's gonna hit on Emily." Everyone around started laughing, and Emily, looking at me, said, "Him? He's so boring." The laughter was loud. I felt my face burning with shame, and what did I do? I laughed with them, made fun of myself, pretended it was all just a joke. At home, I locked myself in the bathroom, turned the shower all the way up so no one could hear, and cried with my back against the cold tiles until the water turned cold. The next day, I was there again, laughing like nothing happened. I'd already learned. The whole world could see me, but not what I really felt. When my grandpa died, I was 16. He was my dad's father. A tough man, not very talkative, but sometimes he'd look at me in a way that seemed to say, "I get you." The news came on a Tuesday morning. My mom picked up the phone, went pale, sat down slowly. "Your grandpa had a heart attack. He didn't make it." I felt a hole open in my chest. That kind of emptiness you can't explain, but it weighs like concrete. At the funeral, my mom was sobbing. My aunts kept dabbing their faces with tissues every 5 minutes. My cousins cried in each other's arms. And my dad? My dad was in a suit, arms crossed, staring at the casket with a stone face. Not a single tear, no shake in his voice. I remember thinking, one day I'm gonna be like that. Strong, cold, unshakable. I looked at my dad at that funeral and saw the model I wanted to copy. The man who doesn't flinch, the man who holds it all together. I didn't realize that along with that came a huge loneliness. A loneliness he carried too, but never admitted. Years later, I met Sarah. It was at a birthday party for a mutual friend. She was in a corner, talking to a friend, and something about the way she laughed caught my attention. I walked over with that fake confidence I'd perfected, cracked a few jokes, she laughed. We exchanged numbers. We started dating, and for the first time I felt I might actually be able to let my guard down a bit. But old habits die hard. When she'd ask, "How are you?" I'd answer, "I'm good," even when I wasn't. We got married without much planning, a simple civil ceremony, and lunch with the family after. And then the news came. She was pregnant. The first time I saw our son Ethan's heart beating on the ultrasound, I almost cried right there. The screen showing that little blinking dot. The doctor explaining everything looked fine. Sarah squeezing my hand with tears in her eyes. I felt my throat close up, my chest tight, my eyes fill with water. But I didn't let it fall. My dad had come to the hospital as soon as he heard. He was in the corner of the room when they brought Ethan in. He looked at the scene, Sarah crying, nurses smiling, and muttered to me, "Funny, huh? Women cry over everything. A man's got to keep it together." I looked at my dad, looked at my son, and did what I'd always done. I held it in. I smiled for the pictures, joked with the nurses, shook the doctor's hand firmly. Inside, all I wanted was to fall apart, to cry the way Sarah was crying, to say out loud, "I've never felt anything this strong in my life." But the first lesson I learned as a father was the same as in childhood. Feel, yes. Show it, never. Over time, routine hit full force. Work, traffic, bills, sleepless nights. Waking up at 5 in the morning, showering in the dark so I wouldn't wake anyone up, catching the 6 a.m. train packed with people wearing the same exhausted face, getting to the office already drained, opening my email to 50 urgent messages, sitting through meetings that could have been emails, impossible deadlines. My boss was one of those guys who loves reminding you there are 100 people waiting for your job. The type who turns pressure into a management tool. He'd walk past my desk and say, "So Michael, you gonna handle this? Or should I give it to someone else? If you can't handle the pressure, you can always leave. We don't have time for whining here. Results are what matter." I handled it, or at least I pretended to. At night, at home, I tried to be present. I played with Ethan, helped with his homework, talked with Sarah about her day. She worked at an accounting firm, came home tired too, but always found the energy to ask, "And your day, babe? How was it?" My answer was always the same. "Ah, the usual. Busy. But it's fine." It wasn't fine. But I didn't even know how to say I wasn't anymore. The words to describe what I felt had disappeared from my vocabulary. The furthest I'd go was tired. I'm just tired. It was the only emotion allowed. Months before the layoff, my body was already sending warning signs. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that could go wrong. Sometimes, in the middle of a meeting, I'd suddenly feel short of breath, like someone was squeezing my chest from the inside. I'd get up, go to the bathroom, throw water on my face, breathe deeply, looking at myself in the mirror. Then I'd go back like nothing happened. One day Sarah noticed something was off. "Are you okay? You look worried." "I'm fine. Just work." "Do you want to talk?" "There's nothing to talk about. It's just a phase." I lied to her. I lied to myself. I lied to everyone. The truth was, I was exhausted. Not just physically, emotionally. But admitting that would mean admitting weakness. And I'd been trained my whole life never to do that. That Tuesday started like any other day. Quick coffee, standing in the kitchen, a kiss on Ethan's forehead while he slept, softly snoring, hugging a stuffed dinosaur, a tight hug with Sarah at the door. "Have a good day at work," she said. "You too," I answered. On the train, I stared out the window without seeing anything. My mind was already at the office, mentally going over the day's tasks and over the month's bills: rent, electricity, water, internet, Ethan's school, credit card, groceries. I did the math in my head. If I work hard, don't complain, say yes to everything they throw at me, we can make it. I got to work at the usual time. Said hi to the security guy in the lobby, took the crowded elevator up, sat down at my desk, opened my email. There was a message with the subject: Department Restructuring, Confidential, from HR. I clicked it with that bad feeling in my gut. You know when you already know what's coming, but you still want to believe it's not? When I opened it, I saw my name in the middle of a bunch of pretty words. "Dear Michael, due to the difficult moment the company is going through and after a strategic decision by the board, we regret to inform you that your position has been eliminated. Please know this is not a reflection of your performance." I read it and reread it. 3 times. 4. Waiting to find a line like, "Just kidding. This is a test. Please disregard this email." It wasn't there. My boss showed up at my desk 10 minutes later. "Michael, can we talk in the conference room for a second?" The talk was half a dozen canned phrases. He spoke about a great opportunity to start fresh, about when one door closes, another one opens, patted me on the back like he was doing me a favor. "You're good at what you do. You'll find something in no time." I wanted to tell him I was scared, that I didn't know how we were going to pay rent next month, that my kid was growing and needed stability, that I was 40 and had no idea how to start over. But what came out was, "It's okay, I understand. It happens." I shook his hand, thanked him for the years at the company, packed my stuff into a cardboard box, mug, a framed picture of Ethan, a few books, and left. On the walk to the subway, carrying that box in my arms, I caught myself repeating in my head, "A man figures it out. A man handles it. A man doesn't fall apart." The sun was way too bright for a Tuesday of personal disaster. I walked down the street with the box in my arms, and people passed by without looking. No one knew. To everyone else, I was just another guy in the crowd. But inside my head, a movie was on repeat. What am I going to tell Sarah? How am I going to explain it to Ethan? What if I don't find another job? What if we have to move out? What if... The what-ifs wouldn't stop. Each what-if pulled another. And another. I sat down on a bench near the subway entrance, set the box down beside me, and just stared into nothing. An older man walked by and asked, "You all right, son?" I answered on autopilot. "Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks." He went on his way, and I stayed there, trying to understand how my life had flipped upside down in one morning. Instead of going straight home, I decided to pick Ethan up from school. It wasn't my day to pick him up. Sarah usually did. But I needed to feel that, at least there, I still had a clear role. Being a dad. That was the one job no one could fire me from. I parked in front of the school and waited for the bell. The kids came pouring out, running, yelling, laughing. Ethan saw me and came running over, excited. "Dad, you came to pick me up." "Yeah, buddy, surprise." He got in the car, tossed his backpack onto the back seat and started talking right away. "Dad, I think I blew my math test. There was division. I hate division. Everyone knows their times tables, I don't. Liam even knows the nines. What if I have to repeat the grade?" He talked non-stop, not even noticing I barely replied. While he rambled, I watched his little face in the rearview mirror. An 8-year-old boy worried about multiplication tables, about division, about repeating a grade. And me, nearly 40, with no idea how to tell him I'd just lost my job. I said something automatic. "Relax, buddy. If it went bad, we'll just study more. It's not a big deal. We'll practice the times tables, you'll see." He seemed relieved, changed the subject, started talking about recess, a goal he'd scored, a fight between 2 boys in his class. I heard about half of it. The other half of my mind was still stuck on that email. I pulled up in front of our place, turned off the engine but couldn't bring myself to get out. Ethan was still talking, now happily, telling me how his friend had fallen at recess and everyone laughed, how the teacher scolded the class, how lunch was pizza and he'd had 2 slices. I smiled out of politeness, threw in a uh-huh at the right moments, but my head was in a different movie. I saw the landlord calling, "Michael, your rent is late." I saw the credit card maxed out. I saw Sarah asking, "So, now what? What are we gonna do?" I saw Ethan needing school supplies, new uniforms, things that cost money I no longer had. Silence came all at once. Not outside. Ethan had gone quiet, scrolling on my phone. But inside. I felt a weight on my chest, like someone had sat on my heart. My hand on the wheel was shaking. My breathing turned short and fast. The air wouldn't go in right. It felt like the car had shrunk, like the walls were closing in. I thought, not now. Hold it together. Your kid is here. A man doesn't fall apart in front of his son. I tried to swallow it. Like I'd done my whole life. I gripped the steering wheel harder. Took 1, 2, 3 deep breaths. Tried to think about something else. But my body seemed tired of obeying. It was like all the tears I'd swallowed since I was 6 had gathered in one place, pushing to come out. And this time, the dam didn't hold. Before I knew it, a tear ran down my face, dropped onto my lap. Then another, and another. I quickly wiped my face, turned to the side, pretending I was looking for something on the floor of the car. "Where's my wallet?" I muttered, trying to cover it up. That's when I heard, "Dad?" Ethan's voice, small, different. Not the voice of a kid asking a random question. The voice of someone who knows something's wrong. "Are you crying?" My world stopped on that question. The time between his question and my answer felt endless. 1 second that lasted an hour. My first reaction was the oldest one I knew. Lie. "No, buddy. I just got something in my eye. This car's so dusty." I forced a laugh, wiped my face again. Silence. I could feel his eyes on me in the rearview mirror, but I didn't have the courage to turn and look at him. After a few seconds that felt like minutes, he spoke again. "Dad, are you sad?" It wasn't, "What happened?" It wasn't, "Why are you like that?" It wasn't, "Stop crying." It was, "Are you sad?" A simple question, direct, without judgment. And nobody had ever asked me that like that before. Not my dad, who always told me to swallow it. Not my mom, who told me to be stronger. Not my friends, who didn't even know I felt anything. Not my boss, who didn't care. An 8-year-old kid had just asked me the most important question of my life. Right then, I realized I had a choice. I could keep being the strong man, who lies even to an 8-year-old. I could make up another excuse, change the subject, pretend it was nothing. Or, for the first time in my life, I could be whole in front of my son. No mask, no armor, no lies. It took me a while to speak. My voice came out rough, stuck, as if every word had to fight through a throat full of knots. "Yeah, buddy. Today, I am sad." Ethan stared at me in silence, his little eyes focused, unafraid. I went on, because if I stopped, I'd lose my nerve. "I lost my job today, buddy. That place I used to go every day, you know? They said they don't need me there anymore. He frowned, trying to understand. And I don't know how things are going to look yet, I added. I'm scared. That word, scared, stuck in my throat like it had thorns. I'd never said it out loud to anyone. Not to Sarah. Not even to myself in the mirror. Admitting fear was admitting I wasn't the superhero everyone thought. It was admitting I was as human as anybody else. I braced for Ethan to panic, for him to ask if we'd go hungry, if we'd have to move out, if everything was going to get bad, if I'd never find another job, but he just did one thing. He unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the back door, climbed into the front, wedged himself between the steering wheel and my chest and hugged me. His small arms squeezing me as hard as he could. His face buried in my shoulder. And he said, in that little kid voice that still believes everything will be okay, "It's okay, Dad. I cry when I'm scared too. One time I cried because I thought there was a monster in my closet. It's okay to cry." I felt his chin on my shoulder, the smell of kids' shampoo in his hair, his heart beating fast against my chest. In that hug, I realized that, for the first time, someone was telling me, "You don't have to be strong all the time," and that someone was 8. That night, after dinner and tucking Ethan into bed, Sarah came into the living room. I was sitting on the couch, staring at nothing, the TV on some channel I wasn't even watching. She sat next to me and asked, "Are you going to tell me what happened today, or do I have to guess?" I tried to joke, as always. "Why do you think something happened?" She looked me in the eyes and answered straight, "Because I've known you for over 10 years, Michael. And because Ethan told me he saw you crying in the car." That sentence hit like a bucket of cold water. I felt a stab of shame. It was like I'd failed as a father, like I'd revealed an unforgivable weakness to my own son. "I didn't want to scare him," I said quietly, but I couldn't hold it in. Sarah stayed quiet, waiting, and I told her. I told her about the layoff, the email, the boss with the canned phrases, the walk to the subway with the box in my hands. How I felt useless, a failure, a burden. I said things I'd never said out loud, about the fear of not paying the bills, about the shame of telling the family, about the feeling that I'd let everyone down. I expected a scolding, expected to hear, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Or, "You should have had a backup plan," or anything that confirmed I'd messed up. Instead, Sarah held my hand and said, "You're not useless, Michael. You're human. You're not supposed to handle everything alone." I looked at her, half not believing her. She went on, "You know how many times I wanted to tell you that I was scared too? Of losing my job, of not managing the house, Ethan, everything, but I thought you didn't want to hear it. I thought I'd sound weak. I stayed silent. We've spent years living together, hiding the exact same things from each other," she said. "That's really sad, isn't it?" On that couch, we had a conversation we should have had years before. We talked about fears, insecurities, frustrations, things I used to think were silly to talk about. I'd been too busy being strong to notice that I also needed taking care of. And so did she. A few days later, I finally worked up the courage to call my dad. It was a Sunday morning. I was in the kitchen alone, while Sarah and Ethan were still asleep. I dialed his number and waited. He answered with his usual voice, firm, dry. "Hey, son. Everything good?" I almost said, "Yeah, everything's good," out of reflex. The words were already formed in my mouth, but I stopped, took a deep breath, and said, "No, Dad. I lost my job, and I'm not okay." There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. I waited for him to throw a "man's gotta suck it up" in my face, or a "quit the drama and go find another job." But he just asked, "Did you cry?" The question caught me off guard. It took me a bit, and I answered, "Yeah," in front of Ethan. Another silence. Then, for the first time in his life, my dad told me a story from his childhood. One I'd never heard. He said that when he was a boy, about 9, he woke up in the middle of the night to shouting. He went to the kitchen and saw his dad, my grandpa, drunk, hitting my grandma. He started crying from fear, not knowing what to do. My grandpa stopped hitting her, looked at him and said, "If I ever see you crying again, I'll hit you too." My dad swallowed his tears that night, and every night after that. From that day on, my dad said, his voice a little shaky, I decided I would never cry again. And that my son wouldn't either. I stayed quiet, holding the phone, feeling the weight of those words. I'd been angry at my dad my whole life. Angry that he taught me to swallow everything. Angry that he never let me be human. But right then, I realized that the phrase, boys don't cry, didn't start with him. It was an inheritance. A chain that had started long before. My grandpa passed it to my dad. My dad almost passed it to me. And I almost passed it to Ethan. Maybe, my dad added after a pause, you're right to do things differently with your boy. On that call, I understood it wasn't just about me and Ethan. It was about breaking a chain of generations. About choosing to be the last link. The months that followed weren't easy. I sent resumes to dozens of companies. Went to interviews that went nowhere. Heard we'll be in touch more times than I can count. We had to cut back. Less takeout, fewer subscriptions, fewer outings. Sarah picked up extra hours at work. I started picking up odd jobs, spreadsheets, editing, anything that brought in a little money. There were nights I woke up at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling thinking, what if this doesn't work out? The difference was, this time, I wasn't swallowing it alone. When the anxiety got heavy, I'd tell Sarah, I'm not doing great today. And she'd say, I know, I'm here. It sounds simple, but it makes a huge difference. Once, Ethan saw me worried in the living room and sat down next to me. Dad, are you scared again? I smiled and said, a little. But it'll pass. He grabbed my hand. If you want, you can borrow my dinosaur. He helps me when I'm scared. I took the dinosaur. It stayed on my nightstand for a week. Impact on the future, seen with my son. 4 months after the layoff, I landed a new job. It wasn't my dream job. I made a bit less, the office was further away. But it was a new start. The day I got the news, I called Sarah crying. This time, from relief. I got it, babe. I got it. She cried on the other end of the line, too. When Ethan got home from school that day, I told him, buddy, remember how Dad's been looking for a new job? Well, I found one. We're gonna be okay. He lit up with a huge smile. Yay, so now you don't have to be sad anymore. I hugged him and said, buddy, sometimes I'll still be sad. That's part of life. But you don't have to be scared. Sadness passes. A few weeks later, Ethan came home from school with his head down. I asked the usual. So, how was it? He shrugged. Fine. I recognized that fine. It was the same fine I'd been saying my whole life. The fine that means awful, but I don't want to talk about it. I called him gently. Fine how? Fine good or fine bad? He sat on the couch, stared at the floor and said, I missed a penalty in the game, Dad. It was the final of the school tournament. Everyone was watching. The goalie saved it, and the other team started laughing. My friend said I ruined everything. His voice shook. I felt like crying, but I thought you'd say I was overreacting. That hurt to hear. It hurt a lot. But this time, I didn't repeat my dad's sentence. I didn't say, suck it up. I didn't say, that's nothing. I said, buddy, I've messed up a lot of things in my life. I've messed up at work. I've messed up with your mom. I've made bad decisions. And I feel like crying sometimes too. He looked up at me. Remember that day in the car, when you saw me crying? He nodded. Well, that day you hugged me even though I was sad and scared. You didn't judge me. You didn't call me weak. Now it's my turn to do the same for you. Come here. He came, hugged me, cried a bit, soaked my shirt with tears and snot. I felt my own eyes fill up too. And I didn't swallow it. I let them fall. We stayed there, hugging, father and son, two human beings with permission to feel. Now when I look back, I understand that the day I cried in front of my son for the first time wasn't the day I lost my strength. It was the day I discovered what real strength is. Strength is not swallowing everything until you explode. Strength is not pretending you're fine when you're falling apart inside. Strength is not being a stone statue that feels nothing. Strength is having the courage to be vulnerable. To say, I'm not okay when you're not okay. To ask for help when you need it. To cry when you need to cry. I spent my whole life confusing coldness with courage. Confusing silence with strength. Confusing isolation with independence. But the truth is, Carrying everything alone doesn't make you stronger. It makes you lonelier, sicker, farther from the people who love you. If one day Ethan remembers me as a strong dad, I hope it's not because he never saw me fall. I hope it's because, even when I did fall, he always saw me get back up, without needing to hide the tears on the way. I want my son to grow up knowing that men do cry, that men do get scared, that men do ask for help, and that none of that makes him less. On the contrary, that's what makes him human. The chain that started with my great-grandfather, went to my grandfather, then to my father, stops with me. Ethan will grow up different. Not because I'm a perfect dad, far from it, but because I chose to break the cycle. And if you grew up hearing that men don't cry, if you were taught to swallow everything and keep moving, if you're ashamed to admit when you're not okay, maybe it's time to ask yourself, who am I really being strong for? For the world? Or for my fear of not being accepted as I am? You don't need to have a child to break that cycle. You can start with yourself. You can start today. It might start with a conversation. It might start with a tear. It might start simply by admitting, for the first time, I'm not okay, and it's okay not to be okay. If this story touched you in any way, if it made you think about something, or made you remember someone who also learned to swallow their tears their whole life, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories. Leave a like if you stayed until the end. It really helps the video reach more people who might need to hear this. And if you want, leave a comment. Did you also grow up hearing that men don't cry? What was it like for you? I read every single comment, honestly. Teaser for the next video. In the next video, I'm going to tell you the story of a man who was raised to never show weakness. Since he was a kid, he learned that any sign of vulnerability was unacceptable, and he spent his whole life pretending. Pretending at work, pretending with friends, pretending with family, pretending even with himself, till his body made him pay the price all at once. It's a hard story to tell, but it's a story that needs to be told. I'll see you in the next video.